Hello and welcome back to Fate Samurai Remnant. My name is Baby Dennis, and last time we did the last ending, Entreat the Darkness, which involved Iori reaching out for the grill but deciding not to destroy it, and then having a talk with Saber about it. They end up having a one-on-one fight where Iori and Saber, they clash and they end up using each other's moves, and it resulted in Saber coming out on top because he studied Iori more than Iori studied Saber. And after that, Iori ended up dying because, he was stabbed right through the gut. He ended up having a pretty satisfied look on his face before passing. And Saber takes the Crimson Codex, who is no longer sentient after absorbing the Waxing Moon, and slices it in half, rendering the Waxing Moon ritual null and ending the ritual permanently. And the last scene we see is Kaya running up to her now deceased brother, who is covered in blood, which is kind of like heart-wrenching, but it is what it is. And that was technically like a bad ending because Iori died, but it also felt like the true ending because in the other two endings, I think it was called the Ray of Light and the Flames of Resentment, it ended with Iori's, he said like Iori's blade is not satisfied or something, but in this ending, he was satisfied. He died happy because he got to fight, a worthy opponent, which is why they kept saying that he was born the wrong age because he just wanted to keep fighting. But yeah, that was the end of the available content in the game. Sure, there are more difficulties, more items, there are also the recollection battles, but I think I'm gonna pass on that, at least maybe until DLC comes out. I'm not sure. I'm not particularly too interested right now. But there's one more thing I want to do. So I got the limited or special edition of the game that came with the art book that also has like a bunch of extra stories. But unfortunately it's in Japanese, but also fortunately they provided a translation booklet, which is honestly extremely small. I think it's about the size of my hand, but it does contain some stories for each of the master-servant pairs. There are actually basically 3 pages for every pair, I think. So they're gonna be like about 21 pages of random interactions with each master and servant. So I decided to do I don't know if I'm gonna put gameplay or a speed paint. I'm reading this before I decide what to do, so I hope you enjoy listening to this audiobook and whatever's on screen. So let's head into it. This is called the Fate Samurai Remnant Material Official Short Story Translation Book. Gastronomical Observations of the Keian Waxing Moon, a type moon short story collection written by Hikari Sakurai and Yuichiro Higashide. The first one is of Takao Dayu and Berserker. "You're absolutely devouring that, Musashi," remarked Takao Dayu. From the open paper doors of the brothel's second floor, she watched the swordswoman slurping her piping hot soba noodles with gusto atop the first story roof. Again and again, she slurped and murmured her delight. "Soba are meant to be molded into round shapes, but you prefer to have them cut thin, don't you?" continued the courtesan with a long sigh. To be honest, I was planning on having udon, but I already had udon yesterday, so I changed to soba at the last minute." The swordswoman took another sip of broth, beaming. So good." Her name was Miyamoto Musashi, the berserker with whom Takao Dayu had formed a fellowship. "Bet I could pass for an Edo girl now," quipped Musashi. I would have pegged you for a Shinsu native. The noodles are more popular up there." "Oh, is that so?" Berserker cocked her head pensively. It was hard to say if she'd taken the joke as intended, or if she simply accepted it at face value. Puffing smoke from her bamboo pipe, Takao Dayu looked into Berserker's clear eyes. It was said that the heroic spirits who materialized as servants had no need for food or drink, at least according to someone that Takao Dayu had spoken to shortly after encountering Berserker. That person had seemed to envy servants' freedoms from the hardships of living, but Takao Dayu could not bring herself to agree. Food was one of life's greatest pleasures, after all. Just imagine. Pickled vegetables and freshly steamed rice, with miso soup on the side. What a heavenly accompaniment. With some fish, raw or cooked, to go with it, the meal would have been even more delightful. And one must not forget to pair it all with the right liqueur, of course. On nights such as these, Takao liked to enjoy a tipple of clear, refined sake between pulls on her pipe as she watched the smoke drift lazily on the evening breeze. Denied these delights entirely, these so-called heroic spirits from beyond the grave seemed pitiable at least. Mark my words, dearie. If the day comes and you take no pleasure from the foods you eat, then you've lost what makes you human." The courtesan that had come before her had drummed that notion into Takao's head. Perhaps that was why her companion felt so human even though she was a heroic spirit. At any rate, Berserker certainly held cuisine in high esteem, befitting her claims of having traveled to a myriad of times and places. However, her tastes were peculiar. On a whim, she would suddenly ask permission to go as far as Ryogoku to buy meat, or she might ask for rice balls, requesting that they be wrapped in seaweed of all things. Once, she even wanted to drink cow's milk chilled with well water, but all in all, meals meant a great deal to Berserker. Even that melancholy expression can't mar your beauty, Dayu, Berserker teased, empty bowl in hand. She was probably about to head to the stall or shop that she had ordered from to return the bowl. Takada Dayu made a languid gesture with her pipe. Don't flirt unless you're willing to back it up. What a naughty servant you are. I'm not a berserker for nothing. Is that supposed to be a joke? Even with Berserker's humor lost to her, Takada smiled back. Do I seem melancholy? Actually, I was thinking about you, Musashi. Oh, now who's flirting? Good question. So yeah, that's about how long each of these stories are. They're fairly short. And they can provide a little bit more of interaction between the master and servant pair, so I mean, I guess overall they're kind of just nice little moments. So let's see the next one. Of Chiemon and Lancer. Oh, these two. Whoa. For Chiemon, meals are these all gonna be about food? Maybe. For Chiemon, meals were a form of torture. The gnawing hunger that came from starvation had made Chiemon what he was. The very act of eating was repugnant to him. Still, he had to eat all the same. If one did not eat, one would cease to be human. Perhaps an accomplished mage could find a means to live without meals. With Chiemon's lack of talent, however, such feats were out of the question. He was a spellcaster with only one obsessive specialization. So he ate, his face revealing nothing of his disgust. Perhaps the man himself wasn't aware of his own revulsion. But at least, the Lancer that had been summoned, Jeanne d'Arc, she understood. She knew torture when she saw it. Food was as ashes in his mouth. Every rice ball he ate dragged up unwanted memories of starvation. Even when he managed to push those thoughts aside, visions of that painful need still haunt him. Why? Why do you get to eat? Why are you still alive? Plagued by dreadful sights and spiteful whispers that would easily shatter the mind of an ordinary man, or even one of an extraordinary mettle, he did not waver. It was less eating than it was stuffing food into his maw, shoving it with a single-minded intent. But what he was gulping down was pain and despair, rage and hatred. What are you gawking at? A meal, mumbled Lancer, but her words were interrupted by her master's irritated voice. What? A meal, she began again, this time without being interrupted. Should be a somewhat more peaceful affair, if I may say so. Ha! You think so, do you? Well, I'm afraid I've never had a meal in my life. The words hung in the air. Chiemon spoke true. He had starved from the moment he was born. So malnourished that it was a miracle that he grew at all. He huddled with his family as they pleaded to be saved, as they starved, as they died. In the depths of that despair, a bitter rancor was carved into his mind. Those hunched and desperate family gatherings were not meals. Something so cruel and excruciating could not be considered such. And so, to this day, he remained confident that he would never have a meal for as long as he lived. He had no need for heartfelt home cooking, no concern for nutrition. They were little more than obstacles to his goal. Don't pray for me, Lancer. Pray for yourself all you want, but not for me. Oh wow, that's actually consistent with his character. I remember he said that in the game. He said, you can pray for me or something, or you even show mercy to me, but I don't want your pity. Just keep that to yourself, or something along the lines of that. Wow, okay. I know. And with that, Chiemon turned away from his servant. He needed to recover his strength now that they were out of combat and in hiding. In other words, he had no business with her at the moment. It was up to her whether she would keep an eye out for him in her spirit form. Get lost. As you wish. Lancer vanished, quietly obeying the order. In the ruins of the Great Buddha Hall, Chiemon slumped onto his side. His hunger wasn't sated, though, and the gnawing in his belly would never be satisfied. But the notion that this should feel unpleasant did not even occur to him. For him, this inherent need found in all living things was fundamentally absent. Lying on his side, Chiemon consumed the rice ball with no inkling of its flavor. Watching over him in her spirit form, Lancer understood where this battle would lead. The outcome would not change. Whether Chiemon would go on to win or lose, all that awaited him was ruin. And it was his servant's place to walk beside him on that road to destruction, even if their efforts were seen as wrong or depraved. Chiemon and Lancer could conceive of no other way to live. Chiemon had never had a meal, not before, not now, and not ever. Wow, so yeah, he seems like he revels in despair. He kind of gets powered up from just the vast amount of hatred he gets, and not having a pleasant meal, or having a pleasant meal would actually disrupt that hatred. So he's like, I gotta stay angry at all times. That was the end of Chiemon and Lancer's food story. Oh man, maybe all of this will be food story. Let's see the next one. Next one is of Zheng Chenggong and Archer. First line. Tastes like home. Alright, this is all gonna be all food. You know, I should have expected nothing less. Nodding to himself, Zheng Chenggong raised another morsel to his mouth. His servant, Archer, simply watched as the man enjoyed his meal. That reminds me, Archer. Yes? What food did people eat back in your day? How would you evaluate it? Zheng asked. Cuisine is an art form established over many eras. 1,000 years ago, even the techniques of our homeland would be a fair sight less developed than they are now. Well now, for Zhou Yu, the commandery administrator of the Eastern Wu himself, to say such a thing, I doubt even Cao Cao or Lui Bei would beg to differ. That said, primitive though they may be, the rudiments would have existed. A handful of dishes eaten today would be familiar to those in my lifetime. As they went on with their conversation, each appraised the other with mildly guarded distrust. It hadn't been long since the summoning, and the master and servant were only just beginning to familiarize with one another. Even during this peculiar Holy Grail war known as the Waxing Moon Ritual, the relationship between master and servant remained the same. Still, time and circumstance had fostered a mutual suspicion. These doubts came about precisely because Zheng Chenggong and Zhou Yu were both superb generals. Master and servant alike wondered whether the other would make a fitting comrade in battle. A master's power could be determined by measuring the magical energy one supplied, while a servant's strength could be understood by observing one's aptitude. But a relationship between master and servant could not be maintained by these concepts alone. Even if each developed confidence in the other's effectiveness, it would be difficult to trust one another outright. Ah, okay, so while Chiemon Lancers was kind of suggesting the servant has to follow the master to hell. Here they're like, we have to see if you're worthy, and then we're gonna test each other out. But even so, we're not gonna be completely faithful, even if we develop a relationship, because it kind of shows like they're testing each other out to make sure that they can, do their job. But as we saw in the story, Zheng ended up getting another servant after Archer, so I guess it kind of shows a little bit in this story. Zheng and Archer were both wise enough to know things could not continue as they were. To win the Waxing Moon Ritual, they would need to earn each other's trust. After a moment's contemplation, Zheng hit upon an idea. I have a request for you, Archer. Will you hear me out? Are you issuing an order as my master? No, not exactly. This is something only you can do. As someone from the distant past of the same nation I hail from. Oh? Zheng lifted a bottle of alcohol from the desk and held it out. Have a drink, my servant. Understood, my master. Sitting opposite of his master, Archer gazed at the drink that had been poured into his cup. This is not the liqueur of our homeland. It's Japanese. Archer examined his cup closely. There's no sediment. It seems even the spirits change with the times. Ah, yes, the cloudy stuff was popular in your time, wasn't it? Yes, even a man of my rank would drink like any other soldier when it came time to take the battlefield. Recalling the histories, Zheng asked, was it Zheng Fei of Shu who was known for his love of liqueur? Well, that was something of a tall tale. Still, in my day, soldiers wouldn't have much time for anyone who couldn't hold their drink. Fair enough. Archer took a sip of his drink, and his eyes narrowed in surprise. This is excellent. It certainly is. Isn't it fascinating how different the drink and delicacies are across one small strip of sea? The world really is full of surprises. Indeed, it is one thing to hear, but quite another to experience it in person. Done with his drink, Archer looked up at the night sky and sighed. It was an expression of wonder at the mysterious beauty of this world, and the remarkable sensation of being alive in it. For Archer was Zhou Yu, one of the greatest heroes to emerge from the Three Kingdoms period of yore. That single breath was sufficient to convince his master, Zheng Chenggong, that Archer existed in this place and time in a real physical form. Alright, Archer's last, conscious moment before he got possessed was them sharing a drink as well. Ooh, okay, so it shows how their love of liqueur actually translates into the game. Huh, cool. Something then occurred to Zheng. He realized that ever since Archer had been summoned, he had considered the heroic spirit akin to a ghost. Of course, that was partially correct. Servants were records of historical figures, concepts from the past, but this servant could enjoy a good drink and wonder at the mysteries of the world. There was no mistake that some part of him was alive. The man before him was a legendary hero, but not a god. Alright, no more standing on ceremony. Let us speak our minds. If they could reach an understanding, Zheng would let go of his fears. He set his mind to trying to charm the clever and courageous general. After all, if he couldn't manage that much, how could he ever hope to restore his nation? Well, I'm not certain that I have much to say. Archer could see Zheng's efforts to break the ice. If this had been some conceited lord like Yuan Shu who declared himself an emperor, he would have immediately distanced himself. But I must say, the drink isn't bad at all. Archer liked the drink, and he liked the food, and he even found himself liking this young hero before him who sought to restore a nation. Ever since being summoned, Archer had kept his distance, but as Zheng Chenggong spoke openly before him, he felt his reservations fading, and a smile graced his lips for his master. Okay, that was Archer and Zheng's. The next one would be Dorothea Koyet and Assassin. Well, yeah, about Archer's and Zheng's, I like that story the most out of everyone so far, because we saw that kind of relationship they had in the game. How they, they trust each other, but by the time we saw them, they trust each other. But by all means, like, the basis of it was like a working relationship, and although Zheng did like really treat him as a friend at the end, he was originally viewing him as, a tool. But after sharing a drink and sharing experiences, they end up becoming friends. It does kind of hurt that Zheng ended up doing what he did, although I'm not gonna say it was despicable or anything. It really sours the relationship I thought that he and Archer had, but that is how it is. Of Dorothea Koyet, an assassin. Dorothea Koyet bore a strong sense of nobility. This was more than the pride of a Swedish aristocrat, though. Rather, hers was a nobility claimed by a great many mages. Possessing abundant assets and vast domains, as well as wielding mystics so powerful that no ordinary person could even fathom them, mages such as her were effectively superior beings. Perhaps for them, the title of noble was right on the mark, and those in superior positions must partake in suitable superior fare. Take breakfast, for example. Okay, yeah, this is definitely all just food stories. Take breakfast, for example. Even while in the foreign nation of the Orient, freshly baked bread was a must. Ham, cheese, and a butter spread went without saying. I'll have a nice Gouda to go with fresh bread. Ham and butter too, of course, and I'll leave how to prepare the eggs up to you. These were the instructions she was said to have given regarding her breakfast menu the morning she decided to accompany her father, Frederick Koyet, who is a real person by the way, on his voyage to Japan. Her requests were completely unreasonable. Bread, not in especially difficult order. Needless to say, it had to be made with pure wheat flour. This much was ordained by the house retainer Giovanni. Bread made from rye or maize may have been a choice, with the rye variety being especially popular in the Netherlands. Dorothea, however, preferred the softness of wheat bread, and though the scale of production was less than that of rice, wheat was readily found in Japan. Compared to the making of a castella, the ingredient for this bread were probably still easy enough to find. On the other hand, baking bread required a stove which needed to be assembled on site with all haste. Cheese and butter. These presented a challenge, as dairy products were still uncommon in Japan at the time. Dairy products had come over long ago during the Asuka period of the 7th century. They had cheese and other dairy products at the time? Did not know. But the Japanese would have to wait until decades after the Keian era before dairy farming would become more popular. Considering the lengthy voyage needed to import Gouda and other hard cheeses that kept well, finding even a sliver of cheese in Japan was no mean feat. As such, there was no choice but to start from scratch with milk from draft cattle. Ham. Dorothea was especially fond of the pork variety. Wait, is ham made from other things too? I thought ham was mainly just pork. Maybe I'm misremembering something. With a decrease in meat consumption brought by the arrival of Buddhism, pig farming had dwindled in Japan to the point that pork had become an even rarer commodity than cow's milk. Mercifully, there were still some in the Satsuma domain. When the Satsuma invaded Ryukyu Kingdom at the beginning of the century, they brought home many meat swine? Oh, okay, sorry. They're just many pigs. Okay, got it. From that point on, their culture adopted pork into the local cuisine. It was possible to make ham by importing pork from Satsuma. Knowing that the alternative would require sailing to Formosa, Dorothea's retainers was allegedly quite relieved. So is Assassin gonna come in at any time, or is it just Dorothea's, her and her meals? Eggs, the easiest to obtain of the listed ingredients. Chickens were commonly kept in Japan as an excellent means to tell the time. Because of this, eggs were easy to come by. Oh man, we saw like 2 chickens outside of Iori's house like throughout the entire game, and we didn't do anything with them. Not at all. Thankfully, that was everything. What was little more than a single part of Dorothea Koyet's daily routine proved to be a toilsome task for many of her underlings. In the end, however, her precious handcrafted breakfast was complete. How have this morning's eggs been prepared? Poached, my lady. I see. Just another morning. Following this casual exchange with the retainer, Dorothea Koyet set about gracefully eating her breakfast. After a time, she turned to address Koga Saburo, the imposing assassin standing nearby. I want you to patrol a little bit further afield today. We must ready ourselves for battle. She had no qualms about giving orders to a supernatural entity that could very well be considered an embodiment of mystics. This was Dorothea Koyet's nature, a born ruler with a regal air who commanded others to fulfill her obligations to her domain and people. Such impeccable conduct, her servant thought. If only my descendants could see this fine figure of majesty. Was there something else, assassin? No, I was simply lost in thought. I see. Dorothea pondered for a moment and added, I didn't mean to belittle the might of the divinely endowed heroic spirit, but you would do well to remember that if you ever have to hide something from me, my magecraft will lay it bare. Assassin tittered and said, You have such a way with words, princess. And stop calling me princess, she said and raised another bite of the poached egg to her lips. Goodness, today's eggs are delectable. Later, when Giovanni the retainer passed this compliment on to the chef, he was moved to tears. His children and their children would cherish this monumentous day for generations to come. Oh, wow. Let's hope that, she lives long enough for it to be significant. At least in that ending, you know? Oh god, I've been looking forward to this one. Of Tsuchimikado, Yasuhiro, and Castor. Awful. Sighing, Tsuchimikado Yasuhiro extended his chopsticks. Awful, awful, awful. Miso soup, pickled vegetables, white rice, and sashimi made from seasonal fish. Dude, that sounds pretty good actually. All of these dishes were regularly enjoyed in Edo households, and these were far higher quality than the food eaten by commoners. Even though they had fallen on hard times, a member of the prestigious Tsuchimikado family should never have reason to complain about either the quality or volume of his food. Had he lost his sense of taste then? No, he had not. There was another reason, another emotion that explained why Yasuhiro found his meal unsatisfactory. Basically, Tsuchimikado Yasuhiro found everything unsatisfactory. His current situation, the blockaded Edo, his poverty-stricken family, absolutely everything. However delicious the cuisine may be, if one doesn't have the notion to savor the food, it means nothing. As such, to Yasuhiro, the fresh ingredients and the excellent techniques used to prepare this meal were all awful. Still, he had to eat. Less for sustenance than because eating was simply what prestigious families did, but it wouldn't do for his gripes to reach anyone else's ears. My master he may be, but what a pathetic wretch. With that, Castor further detached himself from Yasuhiro. Castor's, or more precisely, Ieda no Are's, keen mind had plumbed the furthest recesses of Yasuhiro's heart and exposed what lied within. He was small and weak, but his pride was at least somewhat warranted. His hopes and distaste he harbored for his current situation were undeniably heartfelt. He genuinely felt that this first-rate cuisine, the likes of which commoners could never hope to enjoy, tasted awful. The only way he could enjoy food again would be to fulfill the wish that he had made with the Waxing Moon ritual. Until the Tsuchimikado clan was restored to glory and received its due adulation, he would continue thinking that everything was awful. That was how far Yasuhiro had been driven. No matter how poised he appeared to the shogunate, no matter how much contempt he showed his enemies, there was nothing that could soothe his heart. Like a rat pursued by rat! Like a rat pursued by a tenacious cat, he was inconsolably restless and agitated. But that's how it should be, Castor thought. That sense of inferiority is precisely what is needed to seize victory in the ritual. Castor chuckled as he analyzed Yasuhiro's inferiority complex, his arrogance, and above all, his magnificent cowardice. For in this Waxing Moon ritual, a mortal melee of supernatural beings, victory and survival were one and the same. Still bemoaning the awful state of things, Tsuchimikado Yasuhiro continued scheming. Deep down, he prayed that food might someday become pleasing again. Wow, that one was really short. That was only 2 pages. But that does explain a little bit about Tsuchimikado and I was gonna say Tsuchimikado and Yasuhiro, but Tsuchimikado and Castor's relationship. They never cared about each other. Not at all. And, I mean, Castor was definitely trying to expose, like, the darkness in his heart in order to understand him. He kind of did that for, like, a lot of the people he met. So I guess that's, like, one of his special abilities. Ooh, the next one's gonna be interesting, too. Of Yui, Shosetsu, and Rider. Thank you. Breakfast was delicious as always. In the cool morning light, Yui Shosetsu appeared to be enveloped in brilliance. It wasn't hard to imagine why the housemaid froze for a moment while clearing the table. She was entranced. That unblemished alabaster skin, those wistful eyes, glistening as if damp with the morning dew, and those ethereal lips. Shosetsu had always had pale skin, but the otherworldly beauty that radiated from it in the early morning light was known only to the housemaids and a few selected disciples. Although that heavenly glamour had briefly intoxicated the housemaid, a look of dejection crossed her face next. This morning was the same. Shosetsu had hardly touched her food again. Aside from the small sips of soup, nothing else had been eaten. Not the rice, not the pickled vegetables, not even the lavish salted salmon. Please forgive me. The food obviously wasn't to your liking. No, you misunderstand. I enjoyed it very much. Shosetsu's earnest eyes regarded the housemaid. It has always been my nature to consume a modest diet. Please forgive my discourtesy every morning. I am eternally grateful to you all. The words almost sounded like the truth. Oh, what a wicked master you are. Shedding the spirit form, Shosetsu's servant, Miyamoto no Raiko. Oh, not Ushigozen, but Miyamoto no Raiko. Because that's what he thought at first. He was tricked. Shrugged. As if observing some pathetic shambling beast, the masked rider watched the tearful housemaids hurry away and addressed Shosetsu. Her love is unrequited, I expect. How cruel. Rider did have a point. Shosetsu felt a degree of guilt over these humans, maid and students both, whose furtive glance conveyed a passion beyond friendship or allegiance. First, she had not been born in a natural way. Hers was an artificial life. They really have like all the spoilers here. In the nomenclature of Western magecraft, she belonged to a subcategory of homunculus. Unbeknownst to the ones who gazed at her, she shared neither their race nor even their species. Secondly, her life. Your time is limited more than most, if you mean to set the world aright. You need not remind me, Rider. I will obtain the waxing moon and right the wrongs of this world. That is the sole purpose of my existence. Would be fleeting. Yui Shosetsu's body was approaching the limit of its operational lifespan. Her alleged inclination for a modest diet was a lie. It was simply that a body awaiting death had no need for food any longer. As the food could obviously not be absorbed as nutrients, she could do little but refrain from eating and hope that the leftovers would feed another. Yui did not eat. For her wish to be fulfilled, she had no choice but to commit every fiber of her being to the ritual. Oh, that's kind of sad. That's actually really sad. Because, like we mentioned in the beginning with Takadayu, to not be able to enjoy the pleasures of food is taking away one of the greatest pleasures in life. And not only do you not eat it for the sake of other people so they can eat it, I wonder if they even have a sense of taste anymore. Or like, yeah, she's just kind of waiting to die at this point. Huh. And lastly, we have of Miyamoto Iori and Saber. He ate simple fare, miso soup with either dry fish or pickled vegetables. The only other thing he could ask for was a bowl of rice or some rice balls. To Miyamoto Iori, these were the sort of things that constituted a meal. Although nothing would seem amiss at first glance, these ingredients were actually the embodiment of insipidity. A good meal should provide sufficient nourishment for a set period of activity. Food was a resource necessary to power him through a battle, so there was no use being sentimental about it. Delicious food tasted good, and awful food tasted bad, but there was no need to amass meals by their flavor. Simple food was purely for consumption, and that comprised Miyamoto Iori's usual diet. Iori had never said as much, but this was a conclusion Saber had drawn after observing him over a number of days. Even if the notion wasn't entirely accurate, it was somewhat in the region of veracity. This morning was no different. Dispassionately, Iori placed the food in his mouth, chewed, and then swallowed. He neither savored the taste nor showed any reaction. But if someone else praised the food, he would agree with a terse response. But that was all. As if in reverie, he sometimes mumbled about how people must not be killed, even if they were the enemy. The drastic measures might be needed to combat desperate soldiers or skilled assassins, but killing was otherwise to be avoided. Sorry, it's just that I kind of like this, how he's like, I'm not gonna kill people unless they deserve it. Because, you know, like, assassins and, like, soldiers, they're going to try to kill you, but in that case, it's fine, but in general, I'm not gonna kill people. Whenever I think of that, I just remember when, Chiemon tried to attack him in the Ray of Light route, he just freaking, like, bisects. Ooh, man. However many of those perfectly seasoned rice balls he bit into, Iori failed to show even the faintest hint of smile. In Yamato Takeru's view, a wooden carven statue was more animated than him. What's wrong, Saber? What? He pressed. You know, I think you're living a dull life. The words were spoken without guile or malice, but the statement had apparently not been received with the intended nuance. What brought this on? Do you not like your breakfast? It's the same food you had yesterday. I do. It's as good as always, Saber said. Then, where's this criticism coming from all of a sudden? Well, alas, the concept had not been conveyed correctly. Although Iori's circumstance afforded him such delicious food every morning, his blessings were squandered because he neglected to value them. He probably didn't even realize what he was missing. That must be why his life seemed so dull. Such was Saber's reasoning, but it came across more bluntly than intended, for the speaker had never been an eloquent individual, and this had happened many times before. Saber often stated conclusions without preamble. Perhaps a difference in upbringing was responsible. There had never been a need to explain thought processes leading to certain conclusions. The orders issued by the Emperor and Prince at the time, Saber's father and brother respectively, required only acknowledgement and action. There were no other boys and girls to play with, and the sword was soon Saber's only friend. Plain-spoken tool of slaughter must be handled with care, so Saber was usually left alone. It mattered not whether they were at war or at peace. Meals like this, eaten slowly over the pleasant conversation, were almost non-existent. That routine only changed once the love of Saber's life appeared. How a sword was swung, how each breath was taken, how the sky was surveyed, how the ground was trod. Everything. It had all changed. Even the taste of food, which Saber had eaten only to sustain vitality needed to fight, changed dramatically. One moment you fall dead silent, and the next moment you got a stupid grin on your face. I don't understand you, Saber. I was just remembering something quite wonderful. While eating? Saber smiled softly. It's because I'm eating, Iori. For Saber, meals were something to be felt. The creamy luster of freshly cooked rice, the subtle sweetness in each bite. There's so many sensations to experience. It was more than just the flavor of food that touched Saber's heart. There was the warmth of the radiant midday sun, the virtue of people living in accord with the earth. Thinking on these things that should have been revered and protected, Saber would always cherish the gentle smile of the one who explained what goodness truly was. However distant time might separate them, those feelings would never change. That was why Saber, a servant with no physical need to eat or drink, yearned always for rice. By no means was any nutrient required from the food, but with every meal, the love Saber felt that day would flood in, refreshing mind and body. It was in every single grain of rice, every delectable bite. It was for this love that Saber fought. Okay, that's the end of this little mini booklet thing. I really like that last one with Iori and Saber, though I do find it a little bit contradictory. I mean, overall, for the most part, Saber was extremely excited for food, as we saw in like every food section. He's like, yes, rice, 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 rice. But for Iori, it feels a little different. We saw him enjoy certain foods, I guess. I mean, the one that comes to mind is the kakion or whatever that Cersei served. But like, other than that, he didn't really seem to appreciate the food that he had. He just kind of ate it, similar to Yui Shosetsu ate their food. Although, I guess it was different in that case because Yui Shosetsu didn't eat much food, while, you know, Iori just did it for energy. But seeing how all these master-servant pairs kind of relate to each other through their food, it was honestly a really cool distinction to make because, for example, we saw Dayu and Berserker or Musashi kind of just have a normal conversation. They're kind of having fun with each other. Zeng and Archer, they're trying to get to know each other to test their competency, but also kind of try to become friends. Chiemon and Lancer, Chiemon's just a stick in the mud, is like, get away from me. And Lancer didn't even eat. I think she was one of the few servants that didn't eat. I mean, I guess Assassin didn't really eat either, at least we didn't see them, but from Dorothea's perspective, it was a lifestyle that she had to maintain in order to maintain her dignity as a noble. Castor and Yasuhiro, we saw how Castor didn't really care much for Tsushima Kato, as well as how Tsushima Kato's view on life, or at least his reason for the Grail, was to make it so that his family was powerful again, and that's all that mattered. So food didn't matter at all for his family. But for Shosatsu, it was kind of the opposite. She also got like really good food, but she didn't. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate it, but she thought that food could go elsewhere to help more people. And she, she liked how it tastes, but she didn't really eat it. While Shimikato ate the food, but thought it tasted terrible. And then Yuri at the end was like, alright, sustenance killing machine. And Saber was like, I used to eat like that too, which is why I was so effective at my job, but life was really miserable. All I did was hone my sword. It wasn't until I found love and, the enjoyment of eating and just a lot of the good that having a good moment, like a good dinner or a good meal with someone could bring. So I really like that moment at the end with Saber. But that is all I have. Once again, I don't know what's on screen. We'll have to... Well, I hope you enjoy whatever's on screen. I think I'll probably try to draw something. Maybe something to do with Musashi. She was one of my favorite servants, like, before playing this game. Maybe after. I was always very curious about the male Musashi. But, yeah. That's the last thing for this game until we get the more DLC, which will probably come out sometime late in the future. I don't know. But I hope you enjoyed this Let's Play. I hope you enjoyed your time here. Whatever's on screen. And, thank you for watching. I hope you have a nice one. Peace!